Obviously, I think following diversification, trying to find assets that have lower and lower correlations to build your portfolio. But I mean, how do you go about building an efficient portfolio these days that can resist not only central bank shocks, inflation shocks, negative interest rate shocks, and then real shocks like the coronavirus? So I think, how do you go about, in the present moment, if you could guide us, with your knowledge, how to navigate in constructing a portfolio these challenging days?
I'd be happy to. Could we get that slide off there, and then we can see each other better? Whoever's running the slides, would you mind getting rid of this slide? The power of diversification slide. Okay, I guess not.
Podemos tirar o slide, por favor? I'm trying to say it in Portuguese. Por favor, a gente pode tirar o slide, o técnico poderia tirar o slide da tela para botar eu e o Ray lado a lado, por favor?
Okay, thank you.
Here we are. Good to see you, Ray.
Oh, it's nice. Nice to see you. I think first, you have to realize that cash is the riskiest, worst asset. People think that cash is the safest asset. It's considered the safest asset because it doesn't have much volatility. And you measure it in cash, in currency. So, but it has a negative real return.
Mm-hmm.
Here. It varies. So, and the more cash they produce, the more they're going to devalue its value.
Right.
So, what is a storehold of wealth? What are storeholds of wealth? Storeholds of wealth are going to be assets. They can be stocks. They're like money. In the old days, it was gold, although gold still remains a currency. It still is larger than, it's like the third largest reserve currency that central banks hold. So we think you can own some gold, you can own some other assets, but stocks that have stable businesses around the world are storeholds of wealth. So if you look at those cycles in the past, you see that those stocks and gold and in other assets that are reflation assets in many countries don't ever get stuck in the biggest capital markets. The second thing to know is that whose currencies matter. It's important to understand that the US dollar right now allows you to buy around the world. Most local currencies don't allow you to do that. They're only valuable within their own country. So it's a world of difference. The United States is privileged to be able to print the world's currency, but it also is abusing that privilege. So when you think about it, don't be stuck in just assets or a location that you might not be able to get out of. I remember, as I say, Brazil, and by the way, this is, you might remember it, but it's not just Brazil, it's almost every country. There's foreign exchange controls. The way this works is you shut the door and you print the money and you depreciate it. And that's the easiest form of tax. So you want to be in the international environments, in those things, and particularly in places that are less vulnerable to that. And you want to diversify also into other countries. And so China is part of that picture. If we're dealing with the new world and new technologies and developments, China has to be part of that, but other countries are part of it, many countries. So you want to have storeholds of wealth in many countries and many currencies to make that your starting position. And then you look for what's attractive. And when you look to what's attractive and take those tactical bets, you look at flows and you look at pricing, and that's a whole other conversation. So I would say have a well-diversified portfolio of assets that become a storehold of wealth, not tied to just any one currency. With the United States, I believe, is risking the reserve currency status. Because when you look at history.
So if I understand correctly, so for example, would you consider like precious metals like gold or real estate as an important element of this diversified portfolio?
Gold, yes. Real estate, no. So I'll distinguish some things. Can you move it? Is it tied to prosperity? Like real estate, commercial real estate, has a usage function. And you can't move it. It's not like money. So its own supply demand will have a bearing on it. Gold was picked as an asset because it was money. It was a limited in supply. It was universal throughout time. Everywhere in the world, gold, silver were valued. People who never met each other could exchange it as value. And that's been true through time, and it is a reserve currency asset. So that means if you want to move it, you want to buy something, whatever, it's recognized around the world. So it's a different kind of asset than things that, so if you're buying it, can you transfer it? Is it subject to supply demand? If you even look at the types of stocks that you would buy, is it a stock that's dependent on prosperity? So does it go up when we have good times and down when we have bad times? Or doesn't that matter? In other words, there are companies and stocks, there are companies that will earn money in a very sort of steady way. They're not the items that are cyclically dependent. Everybody will use them and so on. And they are therefore a storehold of wealth. You can sell them as long as you can sell them and transfer them to others, and you can and change your mind and move it. Those are better assets.
Questions from the audience, but I would say a common denominator here is about the global reading that you have in terms of US and China. And the question is if you think that the way that both countries have differently handled the coronavirus situation, China apparently containing it earlier, the US not containing it earlier, if this could be an important turning point that will exacerbate this tendency for China to strengthen and perhaps accelerate the trend for the US to weaken globally.
Yes, and I believe that it's not just as it relates to the pandemic. There is cultural differences and also information value differences and so on, important differences to understand between countries and the country. China is a modern, well-run, but disciplined country. So that if they say, don't go here, do this thing, the people listen, and so they have better controls. Okay. Now there's a difference to that. There's a downside to that. As one of the leaders described to me, he said, the difference between the United States and the Chinese culturally is that the United States is a country of individuals and individualism. And so it's very much bottom up. It protects individual property rights. It protects the individual and individuals' opinions. Then everybody's got an opinion, and they're at that high individualism. Well, he said that China in Confucianism is an extension of the family, and it's top down. So you could think of China as being top down capitalist. There's capitalist, meaning you can nowadays, there's a market economy, you can go be billionaire, there's creativity, it has that same type of, but it's top-down control. So then if you're saying, how do these two machines work? You just look at them as machines. I think that's the manifestation of what we're seeing. The other thing about it is, if I make the comparison, the United States' privilege of having the reserve currency has allowed it to spend beyond its income. And it's a great power. If the United States, as you look at that, boy, I would trade off China's reserves. They have about $3 trillion in real savings that are their reserves. But today, I'd much rather have the ability to print the money than if I had $3 trillion of savings. But if the United States loses that ability, it can only buy what it can sell or trade in exchange. And that uniqueness is becoming narrower and narrower. One of the things about the United States, which was great and still is great, is its share of the technology world. If you're differentiating the companies that are succeeding and the implications on the other countries, technology innovation has been a major driver. If I compare US markets and European markets and other markets, the sector differences are a major driver. Do you have a tech sector that's doing that? United States has a tech sector. That's United States competitiveness to a large extent. China's tech sector is now almost getting comparable to the US tech sector. And so if you look at the uniqueness of the US in terms of, let's say, that sector, it's diminishing. So you say, well, what will you have to sell that's your competitive advantage? So you have the reserve currency issue. So all of these things, when you're looking at pros and cons, all these things are to be weighed. Diversification is important. And so, yes, we do see that. We see their economy rebounded, not quite, but almost to where it was before. and their markets are at new highs. We see other economies not rebounding like that and not controlling the virus. And it's not just the virus, it's the other aspects of managing the economies that are relevant.
Right. Ray, I could not, have a session with you without talking about the principles. So I would like to share with you one that I particularly identify with, which is principle 1.1, which is to be hyper-realist, dream high, but always remain anchored on reality and make possible through determination. So it reminds me as a teenager, that my dream was to become a guitar player. But I mean, my realism, I very quickly admitted that I was going to be quite mediocre at it, and I had to revisit my plans. And then I started to become very interested in finance, worked really hard, applied, studied, and then was able to develop a successful career in finance, Wall Street, and academia as well. So my question to you, particularly for the younger audience that is here with us today, not only students, those that are beginning their careers and entrepreneurs, what would be your advice in terms of pursuing a career in financial services and how to be successful and persistent in that career?
Well, yes, thank you for that question, because I think it's the most important. The principle that you're referring is dreams plus reality, embracing your realities, knowing how to deal with reality well, and determination will bring you a successful life. And so and that's because as success is brought about by 5 steps. If you get these 5 steps right, you will be successful. And you don't have to do it alone. You can do it with the help of others. First, know what your goals are. Second, on the way to your goals, you're going to have your problems, your obstacles. Embrace your problems. Embrace your failures and learn from them. It's part of the journey. So step 1, know what you're going after. What are your goals? Step 2, when you have your problems, use it as an opportunity to understand how reality works and how to interface with it well. And then diagnose, step 3, diagnose that problem to get at its root cause. And that root cause could be a weakness of yours. I mean, don't let your ego stand in the way. So, or a weakness of others or something, look at it forthrightly, because nobody can be great at everything. And so embrace that reality and then know what it is. Realizing, by the way, that you don't have to be great at everything, because you can work with others who are great where you're weak. So, okay, diagnose it. Once you diagnose it accurately, that that's your problem, then make a decision to design a way to get around that problem. That's step 4. What's your design to get around that problem? Quite often means you don't have to do it. Work well in partnership because others will help you. And then step 5 is push that to results. Do what you say you do. A lot of people have plans, but they don't follow through with the plans. And so if I was to give advice to young people, I would say make your work and your passion the same thing, and don't forget about the money part either. Don't work for money. Money has no purpose other than what it can buy. So don't make money itself your goal, but think about what your goals are. Like money at some point, it provides security. I can educate my children. I can have security. I can have freedom. And, you know, so how much of that do you need? But don't let that become an obsession and lose your passion. And so if you can make your work and your passion the same thing, you'll be better at your work, and you'll love your work, and you'll love your life. But you can't ignore the money part. But the money part, don't make it the obsession. Make it what it's going to give you. So life is that adventure. I have an expression: pain plus reflection equals progress. And what I mean is, if you have a painful experience, it's going to tell you something about reality. And it probably is going to tell you something about how you deal with reality. So if you reflect on that, maybe not in the moment, because in the moment it's too painful, but just right after the moment, if you reflect on pain and you ask, what did it teach you about how reality works? And what did it teach you about your interactions with reality? And you'll learn something. And I got in the habit of writing down my learnings. Those are the principles that are in the book, because I didn't want to forget them. So I wrote them down, and I'd encourage you to do the same thing, or all the people in the audience. And because when you write them down, you think about them better and in a deeper way, and you have them. And when the next thing comes along, you go to that principle, and they're like recipes for success. And so you'd have to know, if this comes along, you do that thing. And you can even share them with others to say, do they make sense? Would you do that differently? So that would be the advice I'd give.
Perfect. And I understand from your staff, and I also saw your presentation, that your expertise on Brazil, it's long dated, that you've been in Brazil many years ago. If you mind, sharing with us your visits, doing research in Brazil. The picture that you have in your slide, I mean, I don't know if you can put it up on the screen.
Yes, I was doing a special kind of research in Brazil.
Yeah, I mean,
so
it was
if you have
technology sector or stocks or bonds.
Do we have the slide?
Será que a gente consegue colocar o slide, o último slide da apresentação ou não? I'm trying to see if we can put the slide up on the presentation. Just bear with us 1 minute. Oh, there you go. Here you are.
I'm the guy on the left. So that was, I've been to a number of carnivals, and I've been to Brazil, and like I say, God is a Brazilian. My research was not stocks. My research wasn't bonds. I love Brazil. I still, go there periodically, and I love it. It's a very, very special place. So yes, I have good memories.
That's great. And I think, one last question in terms of Brazil. I think Brazilians are also waking up to the harsh reality of effectively zero real interest rates. I mean, and exactly as you said, they're very heavily concentrated. I mean, in the Brazil beta. I mean, it's all Brazil exposure. I mean, how should they go about, considering a global portfolio, and at what pace? What would you advise them in terms of diversifying that portfolio, given that the easy fixed income is no longer there?
Well, I think history has made it obvious you'll need to diversify, concentration. You can have not only the low real rates, but you can have foreign exchange controls. There are so many different ways that there are damages, and you don't want to keep all of your eggs in one basket. And so I don't know what to say beyond what I've said before, but it's so important to diversify countries, asset classes, currencies, and to stay out of cash and to stay into those kind of other assets around the world. It's the same thing, you know. Wealth is not destroyed as much as it's shifted. It's like a balloon. You squeeze one part of the balloon and it happens here. And so it is always moving. And when it does that, and you can have a lost decade, or you can lose a high percentage of it, but it goes somewhere else. So have that.
Understand. I think I could spend, another hour or two asking you so many questions. I get also a lot of questions from the audience, but I understand that Benchimol and Karel would like to say a few closing remarks and also to thank you for being here with us for this hour.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's a treat. I appreciate our relationship.
Podemos conectar o Benchimol e o Karel já?
Guys, are you hearing us?
Yeah.
Yes, we are. Perfect.
Hello, Ray. It was an honor for us having you here with us. Was an amazing lesson. Thank you very much again, and I hope that you can come to Brazil soon, in the next maybe years. I don't know, months.
Maybe not this year, but maybe next year. Yeah. You're surely invited here.
Yeah.
But I'll surely be there as soon as I can, because I would love.